All right. So in this video, I will be attempting to explain the CSS position property. And I say attempting because number one, I am studying for my tech evaluation. And one of the things is that we need to be able to explain programming concepts in plain English. So this is me attempting to do just that. I just spent some time going over the position property in CSS. And I'm just going to attempt to say what each of the different aspects of that property entail. So number one is that there is the static, then relative, then absolute, and then fixed position. So if you're in CSS and you're trying to position an element, then you would have those four options essentially to use as a value or a keyword in alignment with the position property. So I'm just going to have a little reference area here that I'm going to look at if I get a bit lost. So let's start with static. So static is the keyword that you would use along with the position property if you want things to just be like in normal flow. So static is what actually happens whether or not you put your position property to static. That's just how the browser operates naturally on its own. It's just the normal flow. So now I'm going to just make sure that that's the only reason one would use it. Let's see. Bear with me here. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so that's it. I mean, static is what happens under normal flow. It's when block level elements get rendered in the same order that they appear in the HTML markup, one on top of another, starting from top left corner of the document, and inline elements stretch as wide as their inside content. So that's pretty much normal flow right there. And which is often the behavior we want unless specifically we want something else. Next is fixed. I hope I'm not too boring. So fixed is basically when you put your position property to fixed is when you want an element to remain in one position, in a fixed position in the viewport. So like, let's say you ever been on a website where you scroll down and maybe part of the menu or something remains in the same position in the viewport. So no matter what you do, it just remains there. So that's basically what fixed is, which is commonly used for like navigation bars and things like that, or menu bars on sites. So that's pretty much the gist of it. I'm just going to double check if there's anything else. Oh, and it's worth noting that fixed elements are taken out of the normal flow, obviously, because they stay in the same place. Offsets. Also note that the use of the left and top properties in our okay, so you can use offsets, which is another important thing, which I don't know too much about. I'm gonna have to rebrush on that, but you can use offsets on fixed items that you can do, which makes sense because if you want your menu to like kind of go down a little bit so it's not just stuck to the top of the viewport, you might offset it by like a few pixels. The next one is relative. So if you set your position property to relative, what that does, I'm going to first say it and then I'm going to just double check. So what that does is basically it takes your element and then it allows you to offset it, which isn't that crazy because you can pretty much offset everything. But what it allows you to do is offset it in comparison. Okay, now see, this is where I'm getting a bit tripped up here. So now I got to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. So when an element's position property is set to relative, it is still in the normal flow. But unlike with static elements, we can use offset properties with relative elements. I thought that we could not use offsets with static elements. No. We can, of course. We can't, of course, use offsets with static, but we can use them with fixed. So basically, okay, so a relative position property allows you to offset your element. So it's still in the normal flow, but it's just offset. So it's not like fixed where it just stays in one spot. But let's say you want to offset your element by 100 pixels and you want to keep it 100 pixels to the right. When you scroll down, the viewport still goes down and you'll see your element pass you, but it won't be fixed or anything. It'll just be offset by whatever amount you want. So that's pretty much what that is. This is pretty easy. And then absolute. So the final position. Okay, so I'm going to once again take a quick look. I have a little graphic here that's helping me. So absolute is when you put the position property to absolute, what you're doing is you're taking it out of the normal flow in that it's not going to appear, it's just not going to be in the normal flow. But what it will be is it'll be positioned in comparison to the nearest, I want to say the nearest parent element that isn't static. Let's see if that's right. So the final position value to cover is absolute. Like fixed elements, absolute elements are outside of the normal flow. Right on that. And can be offset, but unlike fixed elements, they are offset in relation to the first parent container with a non-static position. That's exactly what I said. Even though it was well put together, more well put together based on how I just read it. A common use case for absolute positioning is when you have a nav bar where you want to align a logo to the left and a set of links to the right, like in the following example. So there's an example after that. So let's see if there's anything else about absolute that we need to know. We just said absolutes are in relation to the first parent element that has a non-static position. Okay, beautiful. Now I can see what absolute does. So that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, I just explained the CSS position property, or attempted to explain. I'm sure you guys aren't too happy, but maybe you were a bit entertained by my vocal fluctuations and slight hints of embarrassment. But I just went over the CSS position property, which entailed the static position, fixed position, relative, and absolute. And to just do one quick brief or overview of what those are. Static is when it's part of the normal flow. That's what you want most of your elements to be in general, unless otherwise, unless there's a good reason to do otherwise. Fixed is when your element is taken out of the normal flow and it's positioned in the viewport in such a way that whenever you scroll up or down, it just still stays in the exact same space, commonly used with nav bars. And this also can be offset, by the way. Relative is when your element is in the normal flow, but it's offset. So it's not fixed or anything, but you can offset it. So it's not just stuck in the normal flow, like in a vertical way or whatever. And the last one is absolute, which is when you take an element, setting its position to absolute, takes it out of the normal flow and basically puts it in a position where it's, what's the word they use for that? Let me see. Okay, it's offset. That's what I was going to say. It's offset in relation to the first parent container with a non-static position. So a lot of this stuff is wordy, but maybe you guys will get some ideas on how to describe it better from this video, at least. Maybe I can say I provided some value in that way. So that's it, guys. Position property, static, fixed, absolute, relative. Hope this helps. Sure helped me.